is NewsConference Extra with Conan Nolan.
Good morning and welcome to NewsConference Extra, a special segment of Today in LA Weekend. Joining us is Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press, which airs every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. So, Chuck, lots to talk about. First, the President of the United States, it seems to me, sees an opening. And here in California, 1,000 pastors wrote a letter to Governor Gavin Newsom saying, listen, we can use social distancing and masks just like you're doing at factories. Why aren't you letting churches open up? And a cynic would say this is a president who sees this as a wedge issue and something for his base of support, particularly with the evangelical community.
Conan, I don't think you have to be a cynic about it. The president himself said the quiet part out loud when he announced it. So I think he views this as an opportunity to pick a fight. Absolutely. This is not, sometimes you could say, we've got to read between the lines. On this one, the president read between the lines for us. And when he says, and any government that does this, I'm overruling them. This is an essential service. And then, of course, his press secretary had to admit that the president doesn't have this power. Governors are the ones that have this power. But this is a case where I think he wants this fight. He wants evangelicals. And frankly, I mean, you and I both know this in polling. If you, when it comes to voters who say they attend religious services once a week or more, are more likely to vote Republican than Democrat. And so obviously the president sees a bit of an opportunity here. But I think more so he sees the opportunity to have another battle in the culture wars.
True, but we have an issue here, and it's actually a national issue. When you take a look at the small businesses, retailers forced to close, now curbside service, yet Walmart, they're allowed to have people inside, and people can not just buy groceries, but everything else. And so there's a concern that if people see the rules as being unfair, it's much more difficult for them to abide by them. And that also works to the president's advantage.
Oh, it absolutely does. And I think just in general now, there's a bit of a, call it a current, right? It's sort of, there's just a current in this country towards a reopen, whatever that looks like in any, I think people have patience, but they'd like to at least see something have a little bit of their restrictions taken away in some form. If that means let me walk the beach, let me walk the beach. If that means let me go to church, that means go to church, whatever it means for an individual. So I do think this is a tricky balance right now for a lot of governors who both see the stubbornly sort of plateauing, and that is what's happening in LA County. And we saw Deborah Birx. I mean, here we're locked down. You and I, Conan, are in two of the areas that have been locked down, and it's a plateau. We have not been able to bend the curve. So there's a bit of frustration there, I think, in a couple of these areas due to that. But at the end of the day, I think that there is a lot more pressure growing on governors to try to alleviate some of these restrictions.
Let's talk about Joe Biden. Big dust-up over his comments, viewed by some as racist in and of themselves when you say you're not black enough. If you vote for Donald Trump, you're not black enough, something to that effect. This is also a candidate who during, I believe it was in 2008, where in talking to an African-American group, he said, in reference to the Republicans, they want to put you all back in chains. So one wonders, is this further evidence that the handlers of this candidate, the presumptive Democratic nominee, have to be very, very careful, because it seems like this kind of thing happens with greater frequency with Joe Biden than we've seen in the past?
Look, I think you're right. I think, Conan, this is only reinforces. We know there's a debate inside Biden world about when should he get out of the basement and when shouldn't. And there are some that argue never. Essentially, don't get out of the basement. Don't let this campaign become a choice. It has to be a referendum on Trump. Up or down on Trump, that's so take a page from the William McKinley front porch campaign of 1896. It's a modern version of it. Call it the Zoom basement campaign of 2020. There are younger staffers who think, hey, wait a minute. The secret to Trump's success in 2016 was he was everywhere, or it looked like, or it felt like he was everywhere, compared to Hillary Clinton, who always looked like it was a controlled setting and a controlled environment, right? So you have that concern that it looks like he's, quote unquote, hiding. But I do think he's got a long enough resume that he has the ability to get away with this. By the way, any other Democrat had gotten this nomination, and I don't think they could afford to basically campaign from a basement. Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, I don't think they could pull that off. A former vice president who's been in American politics for 50 years, he can get away with it.
And this is an odd question, I admit at the beginning, but does this dust up over his comments with regard to not being black enough if you vote for Donald Trump? Does that influence his pick for vice president? Could that actually elevate the chances of Kamala Harris being on the ticket?
You know, I don't know if that in and of itself. I don't think that Joe Biden, I don't think the Democratic ticket, if it's an all-white Democratic ticket again, I think that has the potential to create enthusiasm problems in parts of the Democratic coalition. So whether this is yet another reason why Kamala Harris is at the top. Look, I'm one of those folks who believes the Biden campaign is going to continue to be risk-averse. I think the three people they're seriously considering are the three women that ran for president, Harris, Klobuchar, and Warren, simply because, Conan, why? They've been through the rigors of this. They've kind of been vetted once. And then when you look at those three, the safest choice as far as constituency groups might be Kamala Harris. She's not seen as conservative as Klobuchar, but she's not as progressive as Warren. She's a woman of color. You know, you could see where she becomes sort of the least risky choice when you think about his constituencies that he has to bring together.
Who's on the program?
We're going to be talking to a couple of vaccine experts about the race for the vaccine, what's realistic, what isn't. We're going to talk to the Republican governor of Ohio. And I'll also have the president's national security advisor on to see what, besides a strongly worded letter to the United Nations or to China, are we going to do about what they're doing in Hong Kong.
Chuck Todd, host of Meet the Press, Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. Thank you very much, and stay safe.
Thanks, Conan. You too.
NBC4's news conference is at 9 o'clock, where we'll be talking with the head of the California State University system on their decision regarding in-class or the lack of in-class instruction for the fall semester, plus the new congressman from the 25th Congressional District of California, Mike Garcia, a Republican who flipped a Democratic seat, used to belong to Katie Hill. We'll also talk about the SpaceX launch on Wednesday, and Chris Erskine, the columnist for the Los Angeles Times, says goodbye to that newspaper. He's taken the buyout. That's News Conference at 9 o'clock following Meet the Press. We'll see you then.